Hi, I'm Tim Neubauer. Welcome to our podcast, Training in the Metaverse. Today, we're going to be talking about the VR courses and how they're made. My co-host is Lance Losberg. Lance, tell me how these things are made. I mean, let's start at the beginning. I say, hey, I want to make one of these things. And for me, when I make a class, I'm training a class, I want to talk a little bit about, I would set up a scenario where we'd cover the OSHA rules and regulations, and then we would go out into the, I might play a video and have them look at a flat screen, two-dimensional, or take them out in the real world and actually let them walk through. And one of the challenges I face is I can either find a ton of hazards, I can find no hazards, or to me is the worst option is to actually create hazards so they have something to train on. So tell me, what are some of the advantages that you could see from that same scenario with virtual reality?
So the first thing is by putting somebody in a virtual reality environment, wearing a headset, that kind of thing, and being in whatever environment or world you want them to be. If it's a classroom, it's a classroom. If you want them to be on site to a specific construction site or whatever, we recreate that or go out and shoot that in its environment in its entirety. Or you can take them from the classroom to the construction site and all along as a field trip type of a thing. Yeah. So in those instances that we're putting you in these real life situations and environments and taking the individual or trainee there, then we can also do the same thing from an observation standpoint as what's hazardous, what's not. And we can in post, if the hazard is not there, we can kind of create a graphic, through animation wise and embed that into the environment. Or in some cases, if there is a hazard and don't want it there, we can paint it out, so to speak. So there's some movie tricks, as we would say, that you can do, and special effects are also available as well to use. There's a lot of different tools and traits that we can do to make the scenarios you want as you want them to be, not as you have to take the chance if they're there or not.
So I have consistency and I have a safe environment.
Exactly.
Those are two things that trainers look for that virtual reality gives us. Another scenario I would use is for me in my occupation, hazard walkthroughs are huge to be able to walk through. And a couple of things that safety professionals who are successful, skills they have is being able to identify hazards walking around the environment. And we kind of talked a little bit about there a minute ago, but there are scenarios that we could play out which could be long, complex. Is that something that I would have to set up in advance? But in virtual reality, how would you be able to set up a hazard walkthrough?
Yeah, so then it's very effective and of use for the technology, and we've done many of them. And if you know the path that the person will be taking, or you want them to take, walking through the location to make these identifications of hazards, then we basically put you on that path and in that world where these things exist. One example of a way that we have done this before is take a warehouse as an example. So you're operating a forklift, and as you're driving that forklift, there's different hazards along the way, whether it might be a low-hanging beam or maybe it's another
pedestrian,
or somebody with a pallet jack or whatever it may be that crosses your path, all sorts of obviously hazards that can happen. So we kind of script those to happen, and we'll put you through this scenario, and maybe all these things will be going on, and your job is to identify, where these hazards are and when do they occur, and you're always looking out for them. And then when that's complete, we will then run you back through the exact same scenario, but this time when the hazard occurs, that low-hanging beam I mentioned, now we're going to pause it and we're going to point it out graphically, say low-hanging beam, and maybe a circle with a red line through it, that kind of a thing, or whatever message you want the trainee to have, or it could be a decision tree that could say, do this, do that, or A, B, C, D, and then from there it'll continue on.
And I can create different scenarios so that it's not redundant training if I so chose.
Yeah, endless. Yes.
Wow, that's huge training tool, and it helps with situational awareness as they're going through there. Very interesting. Are there some other examples that you're familiar with of how topics are generated, I guess? Has anybody came up with something really creative for you that stands out?
it's hard to pick out because we've done so many things for so many years.
Yeah.
And some have been so exciting, and a lot of them have been challenging because it's been the first time ever, and
Right.
we've kind of cut our teeth on doing those kinds of things. A lot of the things that stick out to me are the things that could only happen once. An event that I mentioned in a previous cast is when they demolished the Texas Stadium, and we had a 360 camera in the middle of it. So as you're standing inside the stadium, as it's being blown up around you, it's phenomenal. It's an incredible thing. But those types of experiences, and compared to things we have done in the past. Honestly, just from experience, we've done it before or we've done parts of it before.
Right.
And it's a matter of just integrating them or the knowledge base to make that happen.
Right.
So the challenges are a lot less than they used to be. And the tools are much better too.
I can imagine. So talk to me a little bit about the process. So you show up and we'll use 360 as an example. Talk to me the process. You show up, you block the shots, you have a script. Kind of walk me through that process.
Well, the first thing we do, and the most important process of the production is pre-production, and that is sitting down with the client and making sure we understand exactly what the objectives are and then how to achieve them. Not to even mention distributing it or deployment and how they're going to utilize it, but
Right.
also the message they're trying to deliver and the objectives they want to accomplish, and then in what tone or how they want to do it. So a lot of factors that come into play that we want to understand and make sure we're representing exactly what they want to have as the experience for the user.
Right.
And then from that point, we basically kind of script it or have a treatment and play it like you're producing a movie or a commercial in a lot of respects. But the difference, or huge difference, is that we're not shooting in the 16:9 frame. We're capturing everything that's all around. So
Right.
You can't stand behind the camera. There's no standing behind the camera, and you try
Mom!
and we try to do everything in one take, but again, that's where our experience as a company
Right.
comes in. Having just we know the little tricks, we know where the gotchas are, we know how to kind of position people and how to make these things happen efficiently and effectively, so it all comes together.
So you're done filming. And then you leave, you go back to the studio. What's involved in the
post process?
The post process.
Well, firstly, you take you have the raw footage, so to speak, right? And then there's a stitching process that you have to stitch the imagery all together because it's shot by different sensors or cameras, right? Depending on the tool that we use, there's different numbers of cameras and different camera systems. And then there's also the processing of that takes place and rendering of it, and then there's also the editing process, and that includes everything from color correction to various nuances that are involved in typical movie settings. There might be special effects added, and there may be some graphics that we want to embed in there. It might be even company logos. There's quite a bit that can be done, and that is done.
So once the editing part is done, then you have to put it into some kind of systematic software.
Yeah. So once it's all done, typically, and I also should include that we can also use spatial sound or surround sound. So when you turn your head, that the audio comes from the direction you're looking.
Oh, that's awesome.
It just creates that more immersive effect.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And excuse me, so we wanted to get that down to a file such as an MP4, or depending on what the devices we want to display or how we want to distribute it. And then that alone can be embedded with metadata to be able to go on a YouTube, let's say, for example, or somebody can watch it on a headset, or we may want to have that as a series of scenarios with other ones in an application onto itself. So it can be downloaded from App Store or just be side-loaded or loaded onto a headset or whatever. So it's an app or even part of an entire of other things you may want to have included with that app besides just that one training scenario.
Okay. So then from there, it is loaded to a device and delivered to the client.
Yes, it could be done that way, or if the client already has a device, then we can push that content or that application itself to their device itself.
So a long time ago, I remember having a phone, and you clipped it into this set of goggles over there, and that's how my first experience was. Technology has evolved, right?
Yeah, you're actually more the recent. That was like the first standalone virtual reality headset.
Right.
We call it standalone because you weren't tethered to a computer, a laptop, or workstation, which is where I started way back when. It was
Right.
like giant, workstations. So yeah, the clip your phone in, which was like a Samsung device that they kind of were the first to pioneer that side of the hardware. Now we have standalone devices we can put on your
Like this one right here.
like this one here that you can. Basically, it's all self-contained, and the only time you need to access the internet with it is if you're going to transmit some data or download some content or applications and such.
And there's so many different versions of those out there that
There's a handful of different companies that are making these, and again, some are there's budget conscious, and there's also application worthy type things. A lot of different nuances. We make it our business to know who these companies are and what the latest and greatest is and what their future roadmap is for it, so that we develop our content to be compliant or compatible with them from that standpoint and moving forward in their capabilities.
Wow, it's mind-boggling that we have all this technology and how fast it's evolving, and I'm still thinking that my phone should work to do this, and it doesn't. So, well, that is our session on training in the metaverse and talking about how technology, the VR technology, is used in the training module or in the training world. I'm Tim Neubauer, and this is Lance Losberg.